Just like Christmas, New Year's, Easter, the 4th of July, anytime you see the four horsemen together, it's something special. It's a special day. It's an event, if you would. The newspapers come around, the TV cameras cover it because we're special, because we control wrestling. We rule the world of professional wrestling. The world television champion, the world heavyweight champion, the greatest tag team combination of all time, the Minnesota Wrecking Crew, the Andersons, and my humble self.
Welcome, friends of Behind the Curtain. I'm your host, Chris Page. Being joined as always by my tag team partner on this program, the one and only, the X Effect, Brian Katie. What's going on, man? How are you?
Doing good.
I hear you, man. I hear you. We got a, as the kids say today, a banger of a show to talk about. When you look back at some of the great factions throughout all of professional wrestling, the Shield, DX, you know, the list really goes on. The Freebirds, the list goes on and on. But you don't really talk about factions without talking about the Four Horsemen. And there's to me they are probably the epitome of a fantastic heel stable. Uh, Starting back in the '80s, man. What are you thinking about today's topic?
I'm thinking we're covering, like you said, like the greatest faction of all time. um, I know some people who are hard-ons for the Attitude Era might want to say DX or NWO, but this was the one that really started it all. Like they were the best of the best in their time, as far as not just as group but as individuals. So definitely looking to get into this and go through the a lot of the highs and a couple of weird downs in the midst of the Four Horsemen. But let's rock and roll, man.
I want to take you back to 1985. That's when the infamous promo was cut, where Arn Anderson drew the comparison to Arn and Tully and Ole and Flair and JJ. Well, really the four minus JJ at the time. JJ was there but wasn't involved in the actual four. Um, and dropped the bomb, man. And what was happening around this time is they were doing a lot of 8-man tags on the house shows and on the loops and 6-mans and what have you. And they were cut short for time, so they put them all in on this one promo, and Magic was fucking born. That's where you
Yeah,
come
I
in.
mean, it was.
I was about to say, yeah, that's where you come in and say something.
No, you're good. I mean, it's funny how it was probably because of time constraints that this happened. Um, but um, it was appropriate because these guys were all had a very were very like-minded about the business, and now they were looking to move forward and make something of it. Because really, when you think about it, at the time, stables weren't a big thing, really. In the wrestling business, um, and you try to think 85. I mean, you have the Freebirds going around, the Von Erichs in WCCW. But really, other than that, there's not really a whole hell of a lot of actual legitimate stables around in pro wrestling, particularly in the U.S. And So to see this all come together, whether it be as unassuming as this or what ultimately happens down the road a little bit, it's a very different look for the pro wrestling business. So there's a lot of intrigue from the start right there that these guys are coming together.
Well, before they come together as the Four Horsemen back in '85, like the story kind of starts back in the '70s with Ric Flair being brought in as a cousin of the Andersons, which was then Gene and Ole. Uh, so continuity wise, Flair's already known as a cousin, right? And then you fast forward, I think he was working in Continental, and so the story goes, he came in and did some loops, and when he would come in, Arn would be picking him up, and they would kind of just hang out a little bit. Arn got injured on a show and went to the hospital. Forgot how he woke up, and fucking Flair's there, and he didn't leave him. Uh, and they kind of blossomed a friendship, and Flair got him into Jim Crockett Promotions. Fast forward to 1985. The line that Anderson used is the only time this much havoc's been wreaked by this few a number of people. You need to go all the way back to the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. And buddy, they were off to the fucking races. And I think part of what made them so fucking good outside of their talent is they had really really strong fucking baby faces to work opposite of. You had Dusty and Magnum at this point. I think this is before Magnum's car accident. Um, and the Road Warriors, the Rock and Roll Express, like the list goes on and on and on. They did and wreaked so much havoc in '86 because I think it was November of '85 when they officially named themselves. So throughout '86 and into '87, buddy, strap in because it was all Horsemen all the time.
Yeah, I mean the interesting part that you bring up, um, typically the when it comes to rivalries, it says or any kind of rivalry, you can't make one without the other. Meaning, um, you can't make a good face without a good baby, without a good heel. Um, and you can pick out any number of situations where that's the case. I'll just throw it out there, like Daniel Bryan versus the Authority, just as an example off the top of my head. Like, the story helps create the characters in themselves. And in the case of the Horsemen, as great of talents as they were, yeah, you had to have those great baby faces to feed into them, whether it be Magnum, whether it be the Rock and Roll Express, whether it be Nikita, Dusty, the Warriors, whoever it may be. You got to have legitimate talent on the opposite side of the ring to legitimize the faction. Otherwise, it's all going to fall flat on its ass. So yeah, I mean it's obviously you have to give props to those who are opposite, especially Dusty, because Dusty um, was helping book the territory with Jim Crockett at the time. So um, a lot of credit's got to be given to across the ring, but you know the talent's there, so that helps solve a lot of the equation right away. And then it's just a matter of getting the right people at the right time across the ring.
I mean, all bets are off. I think that initial arguments will be made as to which version of the Horseman was the best, and for me, it doesn't get better than the initial incarnation of Arn and Ole and Tully and Flair, with a close second to Arn, Tully, Flair, and Barry Windham. Those would be my top two versions of the Horseman. But in those earlier years, like it was like as soon as the promo drops the next night, in crowds, there's people dressed up in suits and ties and rocking Horseman attire and buying in to the gimmick. Um, And you got to think too. All this is before the internet. Like this is, literally a promo goes out on Saturday night. The next, Sunday, it's went across the nation, and it's like kind of incredible to think about how quickly it got over. Um, especially in that time frame. Um, I think back to what was it? Was it '87's War Games? That was, yeah, I believe so. It was maybe in '87. Uh, it was like they built all these programs to culminate, and this is good booking, by the way. Built it all up for the Horsemen to take on Dusty and Nikita and the Road Warriors and Paul Ellering. Um, and it's like, how much perfect could it get, right? Like the heels were strong, and and especially in that initial 6 to 8 to 10 month, when they really took the act on the road, for the baby faces to get the win inside of War Games. What did you think, going back into that time, or what do you think now, when you look back on time? How initial or how crucial was this particular War Games for Crockett Promotions? Because literally, I feel like all eggs were in the basket.
Uh, I mean, yeah. I mean, this was a very make or break time for Crockett's, as far as to see just how deep they were in it, because you have to think at this time you're talking specific to '87, when they are in the midst of everything going on with um, Dusty, Nikita, the Warriors, and Ellering, when they're doing all the War Games matches um, up and down the circuit. This is when uh, WWF just had WrestleMania 3. They just had 93,000 people in one place. They are they're definitely on the Hulk Hogan rocket ship. They are becoming a national, and really on the brink of becoming an international brand um, in the very near future. So the heat's been turned up. The game has been changed already. Um, Vince McMahon has basically said check if this was a game of chess, and he's just waiting to drop the checkmate on them. So how do you counter that? And it again, it just worked because Dusty is so good at storytelling, and when it comes to taking the best against the best, who else were you going to take at that point in '87?
I think, well, we'd be remiss if we didn't say in this not too long, what, in '86, Magnum had his accident and his career was cut short, which got us Nikita Koloff and the Superpowers. I think Magnum and Dusty were America's team, and they were kind of going around the circuit, teaming up against any two members of the Horsemen, and they were selling out everywhere. Um, I want to throw a little love on Magnum and Tully Blanchard specifically, because I in '85, after the Horsemen, like, I was a really big fan of Magnum and Tully. That I Quit cage match from Starcade at '85, in '85, excuse me. They had been programmed opposite each other, while the when the promo was dropped, right. Uh, so it automatically turned into a Horseman thing at that point. But that was a tremendous little cage match, and I think Magnum got his comeuppance there.
And there was a little added intrigue there. Um, just that, um, it's because there was a lot of personal stuff going on there too, between Magnum and Tully. Um, in that I don't know if it was specifically around this time or if this is something that happened a little later on, but eventually Tully's ex-wife becomes Magnum TA's current wife.
Yeah.
So, um, that certainly adds a layer of intrigue. If I don't know if it was going on around this specific time, but I mean, I know that like that happens. Like those two just like
They played wife swap and fucking totally didn't give them back.
right. In real life, it's pretty funny. Um, but so here's the added layer of intrigue I want to throw in here, just for shits and giggles. If Magnum doesn't have his accident, do you think he becomes a viable heavyweight champion contender?
Absolutely. I believe from stories that I've heard, I think that he was already in line for that and in contention for that. Had he not had his accident, that accident halted a lot of plans. I know that they were planning on putting the strap on him, and Flair was planning on putting him over. For how long that run lasted, I don't know. What we will never know because it didn't happen. But they had to pivot when he had his accident. So there's no doubt in my mind that Magnum would have been on top.
And I think he would have been there for a good little bit because you just take a look at the timeline of Magnum. You look at his matches from back in say like '82 when he first started. I mean, you gotta remember this is a guy who didn't have more than, if I remember correctly, let me just double check right here. I don't think he had more than like 5 years in the business at this. Okay, he started in '78. Like he was a guy that didn't have any real true formal training per se. A lot of his training basically came on the fly essentially. And he was just one of those guys that was so good at learning by doing, instead of going through a school and formal training for like 3 to 6 months and then going out there and starting um, getting bookings. He was a quick learner and he was getting better and better every time he's in the ring.
Well, look at it. I
And
mean,
just amazing.
he's in the ring with guys like Tully and Arn and Ole and Flair and Dusty so he's in there with people that he's got the ability to learn from. I think I really think the first 2 or 3 years of the Horsemen's run were very pivotal and very critical and very crucial. And without the baby faces, there wouldn't have been. I don't think they would have been as successful as they set up that first little run, right? Like, I mean, keep in mind this initial incarnation of the Horsemen only last about a year or so. Back in February in '87, Ole is ready to take a break, and so they bring Luger in, and this wasn't like necessarily one of my favorite incarnations because I've never really been a big fan of Lex Luger. That's just a personal kind of personal thing. I don't get it. To me, he's mid card act.
Well, let's be real. You're not the only person who feels that way.
I'm taking nothing against him, right? Like he made it in the business, and he was very smart, and he was very intelligent. He's a professional athlete. I think he was one of the first who came into the business with his own fucking agent. Like agent brokered the deal, and there was a lot of heat on him for treating it like a business. There's nothing wrong with it. I just in ring. I just didn't. He didn't connect the dots for me. But he's in. Like he's in the Horsemen. He cost the Andersons the titles at Starrcade '86, or that was Ole. Sorry. So he's ousted. And in comes Luger. What did you think about the Luger addition to the Horsemen back then?
See, I always looked at Luger as somebody who was better off being a heel, anyways. Especially as he got older, I always thought he was better off at working as a heel instead of a babyface. So I was okay with it. It wasn't. How should I put this? It wasn't. I wasn't doing backflips over it per se, but it was sufficient for the time being. Um, I had a feeling it wasn't gonna be for long though, just because Luger. I don't know. It was kind of those things where eventually you feel like the ego to him and the way he carried himself would kind of get in the way at some point.
Well, I
Um,
think with me, it's more of a, when it comes to Arn and Tully and Flair, like they're wrestlers. They can get in there and wrestle 5-star matches. Um, I just don't. Luger can't. Like, when they say the Four Horsemen's a symbol of excellence, well, that's what I take it for. It's symbol of excellence. And then to me, Luger's not. He doesn't. He's not there. Um, I mean, eventually he got there as world champion, but reality is obviously that was just kind of a ratings ploy and a pay per view push because they took the strap off of him in a week.
mhm.
Um, but I think that's what it came down to because he was really exposed in the ring. He was a little sloppy back then. And he just didn't jive. And keep in mind at this point in time in my life, I'm like 8 or 9 years old. So I'm really like buying into kick their ass. Like I wanted the Horsemen to get the shit stomped out of them every time they got in the ring. Um, I just didn't see Luger as a threat. Looking back on it now,
Yeah, I mean he's because at the same time he was also still growing in the business. Like you said, you're looking for guys who were made and uh legitimate right now. Like it wasn't one of those groups where for reputation's sake you could this might be a little strong. You could afford to have somebody that was a little behind the eight ball as far as talent talent and success is concerned compared to the other guys. You want the creme de la creme, and I honestly like you look back at it now. It was it necessary to make him a legitimate member? Or was it more really to give him a rub per se? I think it was kind of more to give him a rub. Um, and then when they turn him back to babyface, that's when, for this specific situation, it was more effective for Luger. But um,
I think too. Sorry, I'm going to cut you off. I think it could also be like an optic thing. Like when the initial carnation of the Horsemen, you had the Minnesota Wrecking Crew as a tag team, right? You had Tully and Flair as your singles. And when Ole drops off, as we see, throughout history, Arn and Tully team up for quite a while, and even go up north with the act and find success there. Do you think maybe like that could be a pivot, so that there's a constant tag team represented in the Horsemen versus two solo acts that could, kind of carry the world in the a mid card championship? Is if you wrap 3 belts around them, or you have them in the title scene on 3 different belts, you're guaranteed some quality matches. At least 75% of the people involved in it.
right.
I'm just thinking, you know what I mean? Like it would make sense that way, and maybe I could buy it a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, sure. Um, I don't know. I look at the whole Luger thing as um, just kind of a transitional period in a way. Um, and again, that's not necessarily anything against Luger because he was still growing in the business at this point. Um, I just think it was a transitional period for both the Horsemen and for Luger. I feel like you had to get a feel for how Luger was as a true heel. Um, at the same time, they also I don't know if this is really a true pivot or this was kind of the plan the whole time, but as far as Luger getting kicked out, I feel like this is also their way of trying to test out how he does in storytelling. And, when you're surrounded by, like you said, like the guys that he's surrounded by, it's hard to not do good storytelling. And especially with JJ as well as a good ear. Um, it's in some shape, way, or form, you're going to succeed coming out of this somehow. And in the end, Luger comes out looking like a fresh new face, and the Horsemen just kept on riding and did their thing, and they essentially made somebody without the initial intention of making somebody. I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. I can see that perspective. Luger wasn't long for the Horseman world, though. There was, I mean, I don't know why. I've heard stories, and I'm not gonna, pretend like I was in the room for any of them because let's face it, I wasn't. Um, but the reality of it is when Luger exits, we get that's when Barry Windham's up next, coming
Hmm.
in, and I believe they had to pivot Luger out. Was this when Sting blew his knee out? Like I think they were setting up Flair and Sting to do the title change, and I think this may have been where Sting fucked his shit up and was gone for 8 months. I could be wrong. I know that that's a piece of it, and they flipped Luger back and uh, didn't pull the trigger on they didn't pull the trigger on putting the belt on him either. Flair kept it until Sting came back, but I could be wrong about that.
No, I mean he. Well, yeah, I think he was. Sting was in the first class of the champions, which is when.
Okay, so that's after the fact. That's in '88.
Um, yeah, I mean
That's
Sting
Jan-
was.
that was
Let's see
January
here.
'88. Yeah.
Yeah, so Sting comes in around mid '87. His first pay per view is Starcade that year, and then he's challenging. And then 3 months later, he's challenging Flair for the title at Clash of the Champions 1 in March of '88. So, um, and he's still around. His knee. I thought his knee was like
That's later on in the story.
90, maybe.
Yeah. It's later on.
Yeah. So
Clash of the Champions 1. It's the night that Flair made the upstart, uh, and skyrocketed his career with one performance. Um, it also, I believe this was the show that Luger and Wyndham won the tag titles off of.
the first Clash, yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Wait a minute. Period. Yeah, for the tag titles. Um, and then here we are. 3 months later, Wyndham turns and boom, Bob's your uncle. The Horsemen are back to four. And what did you think? I mean, uh, I guess I didn't ask you this. Like, what's your favorite incarnation of the Horsemen?
This one.
This is it.
Like to me, it gets when you go, but obviously the only two legitimate options, in my opinion, are the original incarnation with Ole or this one. Um, so to me, it just gets to splitting hairs, and for me, um, I'll take Barry's. For me, I'll take Barry's advantage as an in-ring technician over Ole's slight advantage as a promo guy compared to Barry. Um, that's where I lean with this incarnation.
I'm for it. I can much, as I said earlier, I can much rather buy this than buying Luger.
Well, right.
Of course, that can be said for just about anybody other than Jeff Jarrett, a wild slapnut, who appears later on in the story. Uh,
Fucking slap.
yeah, just saying. They went on this incarnation of the Horseman. I thought was good. Like again, like you look at the championship run. Flair was the world champion. Wyndham had the U.S. belt. And Arn and Tully had the tag championships. Um, and this is early, early to mid '88. What's interesting here is Arn and Tully take off to go up north in September of '88. So this incarnation of the Horseman didn't last long, but goddamn, if think about it, if they could have gotten to terms with Arn and Tully here. I think that incarnation of the Horsemen could have ran long and hard. It had a lot of different successes.
I think it's funny how the incarnation of the Horseman that many would argue is the best incarnation only lasted 5 fucking months.
Yeah, it's crazy. But
That's because they all had gold. Like
it,
you have Barry with the U.S. title. You got Tully and Arn with the tag titles, and they don't drop those until literally they're walking out the door to WWF. And then you got Flair as the heavyweight champion. I mean, they literally had all the gold, just like the original incarnation when Ole and Arn had the tag. Tully had the he had the was it the U.S. or I think it was the U.S. title, and then Flair had the heavyweight. Like it was harkening back to the original days of '85 and '86. So it was a great uh it was a great short moment in time, but it was great nonetheless.
the when they took off, it kind of led to the downward spiral, and then we go into Yamazaki Corporation and that disaster. Um, it was interesting when we get them back. We're gonna go to December of '89. Flair, Arn, and Ole uh, are back, and this is when Sting joins the group. And originally, the full band was supposed to get back together, but Tully may have had may have powdered his nose before drug
Well,
tests.
well,
Uh,
here's the interesting thing, by the way.
yeah.
As much as you may have just shit on the whole Yamazaki Corporation iteration of the Horsemen,
Yep.
that's when Flair has arguably one of the best rivalries of his time as a heavyweight champion
Correct.
with
With
Steamboat, which
Steamboat.
we've gone through before.
Yep. That's trilogy. Catch it in the archives.
So just just wanted to point that out real quick before we went any further.
Sure, but again, it's not the Horseman. It's the
No, you're right.
Yamazaki. You know what I
You're
mean?
right. You're right.
And it's weird because, like, when, again, before I go any further, like an Arn and Tully jump, JJ's not far after him. So at this point, for 3 years or so, the more than three-quarters of your act that have packed your houses is headed up north. I would be shitting bullets, or
And
bricks.
Barry suffered a busted hand, so
Yeah, Barry's out. You don't have a whole lot. So thank God Steamboat came back, and it could have been way worse uh, than it turned into, right?
you're right.
But here we are, back in the saddle in '89. We get Sting in the mix, and they're feuding with what I think is another. He's to me is an underrated manager is Gary Hart. Um, and he brought in Funk, Muda, Buzz Sawyer, Dragon Master. Um, they served their purpose to get to what was, I believe, the history-making title defense or title win for Sting. But we'll get there in a second. When you talk about the Horsemen versus J-Tex Corporation, anything strike out at you?
Well, naturally, because the match happened about 40 minutes from my house, the Terry Funk, Ric Flair, I Quit match on Clash of the Champions that sticks out. Um, you know, Muda. See, I remember Muda more for his stuff with Sting than I remember anything him doing with Flair personally. Um, yeah, that's the two main. That's the main stuff I remember from anybody in that corporation. I feel like Gary Hart was more great talent nonetheless, but I feel like his impact was more the WCCW run with things in WCW.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like WCW basically just gave him a cup of coffee and just was like, all right, fuck off. Like it was, it didn't really, I don't know, it was very odd to me. Um, and also at the same time, I feel like Terry Funk's one of those guys that doesn't necessarily need anybody attached to him, like Gary Hart. Um, but it just kind of fit at the time. But this is also weird because at that time, the Horsemen are being looked at as baby faces for the first time. Um, because basically within the we mentioned the Flair Steamboat thing. That kind of like that's when people that's when the coolness of Flair helped change everything towards a face setup. And then Arn and Ole just pivoted, and adding Sting just made them full-fledged faces at the time. Um, which led to all the stuff with Gary Hart's stable. So
We
it
can.
was an odd time, but I mean for the purpose of this storyline, it worked.
We can say that at least it got us to Flair Sting, where Sting picks up the strap and is a made man. Um, that was no. This is where the injury takes place with Sting.
Mm.
And Luger steps in. So poor old Sting just can't catch a break. Um, when they kick Sting out, they're obviously setting up for what have you, and then Sting gets hurt. Luger steps in. Um, didn't really happen. Didn't really go anywhere. But in the time, they were feuding with Luger, Sting, the Steiners, and can you believe El Gante? You got a good El Gante story?
Not until he put on that big, ugly bodysuit when he was facing Undertaker at WrestleMania 9, but
I don't know if we'll ever talk about him again. So, shout out to El Gante. Um,
then the bell rang.
then the bell rang. You're right. Ole retires in '90. Barry Windham returns in '90. So, or it was that May 5th. So you got Barry, Sid, uh, Arn, and Flair.
Mhm.
This incarnation of the Horsemen was you know up there with Luger to me. Uh, I didn't see Sid in that role, although like he got that rub at Halloween Havoc, getting in there with Sting for the belt. I don't remember a whole lot about it. I know they were dealing with what they call the dudes with attitudes, which is now Sting, Luger, the Steiners, Paul Orndorff, and the Junkyard Dog. Or it's all this shit is going on at the same time.
Oy vey. I actually specifically remember this match at Halloween Havoc.
I do too. That's when Barry played Sting, right? And they did a
Which is funny because, like, just the whole. Oh my god. Just, it's. Like, you think back about it now. So fucking hokey.
but back
Just
then
hook, line, and sinker.
it was fire. Yeah. Uh,
Yeah, that's the best way to put it. Yeah.
the only
Hokey,
thing
but it worked.
the only thing that sucked back then, and I believe this is a thing. I think Tony Schiavone blew the call. I think when Barry was coming back through the crowd, I think Tony says on commentary, is that Barry Windham?" But he's got the Sting gear on, and he's dressed as Sting, and he's got his face painted, and he's kind of slunched down and keeping his face out of off the camera. And I think one of the commentators blew the call.
See, I don't even remember that. Um, I'm sorry, but nothing beats Bobby Heenan asking if Hulk Hogan's the third man. But
That's,
it's just fantastic. It's
that
like,
is
Bobby, shut the
fantastic.
fuck up.
Yep. So we have this incarnation of the Horseman through May of '91. Sid bounces to the WWF. Flair was fired from WCW in early July and was in the WWF by August. Windham was a part of the Double Turn at the Great American Bash. Uh, when Flair got fired, I think Luger picks up the world title over Windham.
Mhm.
Uh, Anderson and Zabisco end up becoming the enforcers, and leads to the Dangerous Alliance, which I believe is probably one of the most underrated fucking factions out there. We should do an episode on them at some point, just because.
Fantastic, fantastic group.
You look at the talent involved in this, and while they didn't have the long run, they very well could have. And what if they did?
And it was the launching point uh for Paulie as a manager. Like that was like just being WCW alone was his first big break, but this group was what really catapulted him as a legitimate managerial talent, and it also helped propel the career, in my opinion, of Steve Austin. Like that really gave him that much more exposure for ultimately moving on and doing more of the stuff he did the next few years in WCW.
We go to December, or excuse me, May of '93. Flair stint's over. He's back. Arn is back. Ole is back on TV I think, as a manager. Um, they promised the Horsemen reunion, and we get the job guy from WWF, Paul Roma. This is the cocaine incident from Blanchard, if I'm not mistaken.
No, you were right originally.
Okay.
This time it's just Tully being a greedy motherfucker. Um, fucking Paul Roma, man. I can't I can't shit on him too much just because he's a friend of a friend in the business that because they're both promoters in the state of Connecticut, so I can't terribly shit on Paul. But fucking a man, this was not a good fit.
It was not a good fit, and then the crowd let them know it too. I tell you what was good out of this incarnation of the Horsemen was getting the Hollywood Blondes
Yes,
versus Flair and Anderson. Uh,
yes.
you talk about some good fucking matches, and it first of all, how good's Brian Pillman? Secondly, Steve Austin before he's even hit his prime. Uh,
Is it
and
safe to say that Steve Austin's in one of the most underrated stables and one of the most underrated tag teams of all time?
yeah, in one of, if not the most popular star in the industry. Uh,
God damn.
I mean, it's a toss up between him and The Rock, but either which way. This they, I'm telling you, man. I got to see some house shows. They were coming through my area when that was going on, and I got to see a house show, Blondes versus Flair and Anderson.
So jealous.
33 minutes. It was fucking fantastic.
I hate you.
Uh, just saying. It was good. It's good shit. What did you think about the entire deal with the blondes?
I mean, to me, what made them was the shit they pulled on. What was it? The was it? Basically, first off they shit on Flair and Arn to their faces on Flair for the gold. Then you start.
What
Didn't
you mean
Pillman start?
Flair for the old?
Right, yeah. And then didn't like Pillman dress like did he put on like a wig and some shit and
Yep.
do like an old man song? Oh, just everything. I felt like everything those two were touching at that point was turning into gold, and WCW was just turning a blind eye to the whole thing. It was just fantastic.
Flair for the old. That's what we say. Flair for the old. Now, this is, good news for us as fans. This didn't last long because Arn Anderson thought it'd be cool to stab Sid Vicious on an overseas tour in England and gets shit canned. And Paul Roma turns on Eric Watts and joins Paul Orndorff at this point. Flair went on and feuded with Vader, which was a really good match. I believe that led to the career versus title match in Charlotte, which I don't think
Starcade, yep.
Starcade. Yeah, I don't think that was ever penciled in for Flair. I think that was penciled in for Sid. And they pivot to Flair and ended up getting what was probably one of the better matches in this stretch for the world title against Vader. Um, Good shit. We don't see the Horsemen until '95. Uh, when we're seeing them take on, Hogan and Savage. Because Hogan must pose, brother.
Gotta feed them someone.
Yep. We get to September in '95. Uh, Flair and Anderson 1-on-1. Pillman. It's the infamous match where Pillman gets involved and leads to Arn going over. I felt like that story had so much legs underneath it, and they pivoted too quick. But what do I know, right? Um, it led to Flair, Sting versus Pillman and Anderson. Flair turns on Sting. We all remember that. It was good shit. Um, and then ended up getting Chris Benoit to complete the group. Now this is from this point forward, it's just kind of like a revolving door. I feel like of different talents. What do you think about and I felt like on a wrestling standpoint, Benoit was there talent wise. He could wrestle. Uh, Let me first
If
say,
you're gonna give me any incarnation of the Horseman post Wyndham, this is the one I like.
yeah, and I would too. But again, much like, here's what I'm seeing as we're going through this. For it to be arguably one of the greatest factions of all time, the incarnations are not lasting long. Like within a year and a half, it's freshened up. Um, you had Pillman, which I felt like was a interesting choice at that time, and as he was developing the loose cannon character. But uh, you know, it goes at one point. You've got Flair and Anderson and Mongo and Jeff Jarrett. You've got Dean Malenko, Chris Benoit, Flair, and Mongo with Anderson as manager and all that jazz. Like there's a lot to unpack in those last uh, 5 years or so, because they were for 6 years, 4 years. Sorry, they were a force on television when they needed to be a force, but they were pretty much fall guys for and fed to the NWO.
Yeah, I mean it was a very odd time. I mean, obviously, you also got to factor. Here's the thing: you got to factor a couple things here. Number one, obviously, this was during the time when, specifically looking at '95 and early '96, Flair was specifically being fed to Hogan and Savage by request. Like they wanted to work specifically with Flair because
He draws.
yeah, um, and obviously you can only squeeze so much out of that, um, so much oil out of that can, and then you come to '96. By the summer, that's when NWO is being formed, and now you're left kind of with your dick in your hands because you were supposedly the main heel faction. Now all of a sudden you have the NWO, and it's like, what the fuck? Now what? And you had to pivot from there. So it's just it was a very odd time. Obviously not necessarily the best time um, for the group, as it was coming to a close eventually in like 90. I mean, officially closes down in '99, but I mean, like, really, once once they got to the point of Kurt Hennig being with them for like a month, and I thought what did he do? He like slammed the cage door, I think, on Flair or some shit like that.
Yep.
Um, like when that happened in '97. That was really it. Anything after that was just like, uh, it was just a reach per se.
It wasn't that 86 to 88 run.
No feel. It had no feel to it.
It wasn't, but by then, the industry had changed a little bit. You didn't have the quote unquote good guys versus the bad guys anymore. It had developed, especially WCW at that point, had went the more realistic feel and realistic, stories on TV. And when you get Jeff Jarrett at that point in time walking around like a fucking Chippendale dancer, he just doesn't fit the bill. Um, and don't get me wrong, I'm a Jeff Jarrett fan. I just don't think at that point in time like he's not involved in that. What did he do? What did he accomplish? What did he do for the group? Um, I think we can settle on Incarnation One, Ole, Arn, Tully, and Flair, and we can settle on Tully, Flair, Wyndham. Who was the other one? Tully, Flair, Wyndham, and was it Ole?
Arn.
Arn, sorry. I'm stoned. Um, I've literally been smoking this entire fucking show, just because. But I could talk Horseman shit all day long. But as we're going through it, like again, I'm gonna point out, like I see that there's, or kind of a revolving door, which could be a good thing or a bad thing. But what do you think the overall legacy of the Four Horsemen in the industry, in your opinion, what do you think that legacy is?
Their legacy is one of the best heel factions in the history of pro wrestling. That inspired a whole generation of stables after it. I mean, it inspired evolution with in WWE with Hunter, Orton, Batista, and Flair. It inspired Fortune in TNA with Styles and uh, Your Money and Kazarian, Desmond Wolfe, and then eventually Flair comes around that too. Um, and even went into the women's side of things, where you had the four horsewomen in MMA with Shayna Baszler, Ronda Rousey, Jessamine Duke, Marina Shafir, and then obviously the four horsewomen that coined themselves that within NXT with Charlotte, Sasha, Bayley, and Becky. I mean, they have a tremendous legacy that I think will only continue to carry on. Because again, you had some of the best talent ever involved with it. You had Flair, you had JJ, you had Arn, um, you have Wyndham involved eventually, and then obviously the talents they played off of, the Warriors, TA, Dusty. I mean, the body of work all speaks for itself, and now it's just a matter of carrying on that legacy from generation to generation.
You know who the smartest horseman of them all was?
Is this a trick question?
It was Arn, because Arn owns the rights to the Four Horsemen.
Oh, yeah.
he's just,
Except there's only one problem with that.
what's that?
He's wasting it on his son and Pillman Jr.
Oh, I think it's gonna be a good little legacy team if they get it off the ground. Could be interesting. It's worth it.
I don't know.
It's worth a shot. It's worth a shot. Consider.
They gotta get the right people around them because Brock isn't doing it for me right now personally.
Well, he's not doing it for me either. But
I could see Brian Jr. turning into something. I think he already is turning into something personally. But like, I don't know. I don't know. They got to figure that shit out because
I don't think Brock's even had 40 matches yet. So I mean, he's definitely still learning. But you know,
Right.
we'll see. We'll see where it goes if it goes anywhere. For me, I think the Horsemen will always go down as one of the elite of the elite. When it comes to drawing money and packing houses and getting, having heat, like real heat. Go back to when they broke Dusty's leg in the Omni. They had fucking 10 or 12 police officers not cleared a place. They would not have been able to get to the locker room. Like shit like that. They drew riots. It was insane, and I think that they will forever be looked back at as one of the original factions of professional wrestling, often imitated, never duplicated.
Amen.
What what do you think we're gonna talk? What should we talk about next? What should be our next program? I haven't put a whole lot of thought into it, but I came up with this topic. So, what do you think we should dive into?
Wow, that's a hell of a question. Um, I honestly didn't even think about. I didn't think about that.
Oh, you're fucking unprepared, unprepared
Well,
caddy.
this is a swerve, bro. You didn't tell me to have something in mind. Shit.
Yeah, no, we
Um,
don't do this every week. So, uh, uh it's fucking
Fuck you.
it's fucking weird. I mean, I have several topics that we could talk about. There's a lot of different. I mean, this industry is so rich with history. Like I can tell you, on a future show, I'd love to talk about Jerry Lawler, Andy Kaufman
Oh,
from
wow.
but back in the Memphis days. Like there's so
Yeah.
much that old school shit that would love to jump into. Kitty like Piper, fucking Valentine from the '80s. There's so much out there. So if you don't have anything prepared for us, I'll just wait and let you get with me on the subject matter.
Yeah, we'll do that, and then I'll think of something. I'll think of some stuff in the meantime.
All right, you got anything to say to listeners before we close it out?
Uh, if you have been listening and haven't had the proper mindset to go and check out any of this stuff we've been talking about before, highly suggest you go look up some old school Jim Crockett Promotions video. Um, I mean, I just go look up anything surrounding Starcade '86. I would say. Um, Look up anything around the time of mid '88, early to mid '88, so you can pick up on the whole Windham Luger exchange there. And yeah, those would be the main things I would tell you to go look at. Go look it up. Get it done.
Well, my man, I've enjoyed taking a stroll down the Horseman Lane. We appreciate you fine folks listening to our program. Hey, fun fact, did you know that we're listened to on 9 countries?
9 countries.
Yeah, did you know that? Did you know that fun fact?
That's amazing. That's wonderful. That's outstanding.
Yeah, nine countries. So, and we're looking for more. So don't be afraid to like, subscribe, comment, reach out to us. Feel free to throw some topics our way. We'll work them into our program. I'm Chris Page. He's Brian Cady, and we are saying.
Thank you for being